To Canberra now, where far from debates about offshore processing and carbon pricing, the business of Parliament continues. The House of Representatives has finally passed bills to establish a parliamentary office. But even on this topic, the debate has been acrimonious, with the opposition proposing a more secretive version. Liberal backbencher Kelly O'Dwyer is speaking to our political editor Lyndall Curtis.
Kelly O'Dwyer, welcome to News 24.
Thanks very much, Lyndall. Nice to be here.
The Parliament will finally get a parliamentary budget office. What will that mean in practice?
Well, this is something that the Coalition has been talking about for some time. This is a policy that we brought forward at the last election. We said it was important for the Parliament to be able to have an independent parliamentary budget office, to be able to provide advice on the budget cycle in a non-partisan way, to be able to provide advice on fiscal policy and on policy announcements and their fiscal implications. So we brought forward this policy at the last election. The government said in its discussions with the member for Lynn that it would be prepared to also accept a parliamentary budget office. We brought forward our bill, which we thought was far more rigorous. The government brought forward theirs, and unfortunately the more flawed bill, I think, got through the Parliament late last night.
You were on a committee that looked into the parliamentary budget office. How close was the government's bill to the recommendations of that committee?
Well, look, the recommendations of the committee, and there were 28 recommendations of the committee, they were quite broad and they weren't prescriptive in terms of what the government needed to specifically bring forward in their bill. They gave some guidance and direction, and I believe that both of the bills that were brought forward, sat well within what the committee suggested and recommended, and it was a joint committee. But
didn't the committee go more to releasing information during the election period, which is a problem Joe Hockey had with the government's bill, that costings would be released during the election period only?
Well, there are a couple of things that the report said. It also emphasised most strongly that it was critical for the Parliamentary Budget Office to be independent. Now, that's something that we have been talking about right throughout this debate, and it's been a long debate. We have said that the only way that you can guarantee independence of the Parliamentary Budget Office is to give it real power. And we said in our bill that we would give it the same sort of powers that the Auditor-General has, to be able to gather information of its own volition, not to rely on the Freedom of Information laws, not to rely on memorandums of understanding with the Department of Treasury or Finance. And we think that that is far more powerful and far more in line with the recommendations made in the committee report.
But the sticking point, the one that Joe Hockey, the Shadow Treasurer, picked out, was the fact that during an election only, that the Parliamentary Budget Office would publicly release costings as a given. At other times, costings could be kept confidential unless the MP or Senator wanted them released.
Well, our bill was actually consistent throughout. We said that it had to be with the agreement of the senator or the member that initiated the work with the Parliamentary Budget Office for anything to be released. And there are some very sound and sensible reasons for that. That's so that when a policy has not yet been fully complete, where there might be changes made to that policy, or where there may be some debate about the assumptions that are built within the advice provided by the Parliamentary Budget Office, that can be reviewed and released at a time where the senator or the member can say that the policy is complete and it can then go out into the market. Now, of course, we will be releasing costings during an election period. There will be an expectation that we do that. We will do that in particular if the government get a Parliamentary Budget Office up and running. The problem here is, of course, is that the government wants in its bill to be able to release information where it might not be complete and where there is no opportunity for any senator or any member or the parliamentary party to be able to discuss what goes behind some of the assumptions built into those policy costings.
How often are policies developed during an election campaign? Aren't they done before the election campaign and it's just they're released during the campaign?
Well, generally speaking, that's right. And at the moment, we are going through a very extensive policy proposal period. We have got a number of backbench committees that are exhaustively going through our policies at the last election and reviewing new policy initiatives. We will continue to do that right up until election day, but we should also have the flexibility to be able to respond to issues that might arise during that caretaker period. It is quite a period of time. There will be issues that come up. There could be changed circumstances. surpluses. The government may release some information that we hitherto haven't been made aware of, and the coalition does need the opportunity to be able to respond and to seek sensible, clear advice. That, I think, is in the best interests of policy development. Everybody bemoans the fact that there isn't enough emphasis placed on good policy, and we believe that our bill was going to enhance that.
You said that if a parliamentary budget office is up and running, then the coalition would put its election policies in for costing. But Joe Hockey told the Parliament, saying if the opposition's bills fail to pass and the government's poor imitation of costing service passes, the coalition will not submit its policy costings to either Treasury or the Parliamentary Budget Office.
Well, let's see what's produced. Let's see what happens. It's taken the government this long just to get around to bringing about a bill. I have no confidence, quite frankly, that they're going to be able to get it up and running before the next election. They've hitherto shown no ability to be able to do that up until now. I'm not sure that anything else is going to change. Now, if they do, terrific, and we'll look at it then.
If I could ask you a couple of other questions. You talked about the policy process. Was it a surprise to you that Tony Abbott ruled out any return to statutory individual contracts before the policy process of discussion about workplace reform has been gone through in the coalition?
Well, the coalition has maintained since the last election that we learnt the lessons. We understand that work choices is dead, buried and cremated, and Tony Abbott has reiterated that on many, many occasions, and I think you'll find he will continue to reiterate that. That is a position of the coalition. Now we're going to debate a whole range of policies, including workplace relations, including industrial relations, depending on how you'd like to put it. We're going to debate all of those sorts of policies before the next election. We will come up with a coalition policy. That policy will be released before the next election, and I'm sure we'll be able to talk about all the detail then.
Finally, your old boss Peter Costello never won the Euromoney Finance Minister of the Year award. Paul Keating won one. Wayne Swan's got one now. Did Peter Costello miss out?
Well, look, I'll let Peter Costello speak for himself, but Wayne Swan, of course, you know, was handed the keys to, let's say, a beautiful house that was perfect. You know, it had everything, and he's trashed the house, he's broken the windows, and, you know, at this point in time, everybody's praising him for not having burnt it down. So, you know, I'm not sure if it's particularly high praise, but, you know, congratulations to him. And I think most people would suggest in Australia that the legacy of the coalition government was a very, very strong one. And Wayne Swan will be judged on his legacy.
Although you'd have to say that while you say Wayne Swan's trashed the house, it's looking pretty good in comparison to Europe and the United States.
Well, when everybody else's house is burnt down, the fact that you've still got a house that's standing, you know, by comparison is always going to be a lot better. But when you talk about the relative position, you're negating the fact that we should be doing a lot better. We started much stronger. We actually had money in the bank. We had a $20 billion surplus. We'd paid off $96 billion of debt. We'd provided for the Future Fund with over $40 billion in there. That's now up to around about $75 billion. Now, of course, we no longer have surpluses. We've got net debt. We've got net debt up of around $107 billion, and the government has raised the gross debt ceiling to $250 billion. Now, I don't think that's a particularly good record, Lyndall.
Kelly O'Dwyer, thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
The internet